So everyone's talking about brand archetypes, but what are they and how do you even use them? So in this video, I'm going to be debunking the common myths about brand archetypes and go a little bit further into how you might use a brand archetype and exactly what they are. So if you're working with brands, you've probably heard of brand archetypes somewhere down the line. And traditional way of thinking is that you kind of pick one, as I said, one or two to spike in, and you kind of pick from this big wheel and that's your brand personality. And traditional thinking is that by picking more than two, you're diluting the brand and sort of making it more confusing, so you should stick to one or two archetypes. But is this really the best way to be thinking about brand personality? I mean, when you think brands like people, do you really just kind of fit people into one or two boxes? Is that all there is to them? And is someone else like the jester, very jokey, and then, maybe very daring as well, and that's that? Doesn't really work that way with people. So why should brands be boxed into, one or two archetypes? So the most well-known way of creating a brand personality is by going and looking at brand archetypes, which are sort of this big wheel, and picking one or two, and then kind of that's your brand personality defined. And actually most of what you find online is all about brand archetypes, and there's good reason for this. So Carl Jung, back in the day, he created these sort of archetype characteristics, not about brands. That was kind of done later by different people, but there were sort of these light and dark sides to these different archetypes. And then later on, there came more people talking about archetypes, like Carol Pearson, for example, and she sort of developed these archetypes a little bit further. And then people started relating them back to brands. But firstly, let's look at what brand archetypes actually are. These are there to help you understand what your target customers' needs and desires are and how they want to feel, so that you can go away and pick a brand archetype for your brand that represents and that reflects and almost mirrors what your customers want. So essentially, if your customer wants more freedom, your brand archetype will be the freedom giver, the freedom creator. Now there's a novel called The Hero and the Outlaw, Building Extraordinary Brands Through the Power of Brand Archetypes. And this really sort of catapulted archetypes into the whole world of online and digital online brand building. So that's probably kind of the first book that if you have heard of archetypes, that you will have read, or if you want to learn more about them, then go and read this book, because it contains everything kind of about these archetypes and goes really into the storytelling aspect. So as I said, there's 12 different archetypes, but what are these? So you've got the jester. So this is traditionally sort of your typical Skittles or Haribo. They're always goofing around, very playful, and they value playfulness and fun and being silly. Then you've got the hero, who value mastery, and hero brands are kind of Nike. You've got the outlaw, who values doing things differently and kind of being rebellious. So think of North Face, or Diesel has been labeled the outlaw brand. Then you've got the ruler, who values control. The ruler is kind of is traditionally seen as Mercedes-Benz. You've got innocent, the innocent that values purity, and you can think of, brands like Dove, or even innocent as brands like this. You've got the creator, so kind of brands like Apple, creating something, and that's sort of their prime value as being innovative. And then you've got the lover, who values intimacy and sort of romance, and that's your Chanel, your perfume brands kind of all really fit into that stereotype. And you've got the sage, who value knowledge and mastery, and that's typically thought of brands like Google, or anyone that sort of focuses on education and quite sort of solemn and serious brands. Then you've got the explorer, who value freedom, like Land Rover or Jeep. And lastly, you've got the caregiver and the magician. So the caregiver is kind of, your caring charity type brand, like Save the Children. They value protection and protecting something that's vulnerable. And then the magician is all about power, they value power, and typically brands like Disney have been put into the magician camp. So you then use this brand archetype wheel to go, right, where does my brand fit on this wheel in line with what my customer needs are? And you kind of pick one or two, and that's like where your brand personality starts out. Before I go on, I just wanted to mention that there's other rules of thought out there that also really sort of mirror the archetypes. And so Jonas Sachs' book Winning the Story Wars also has very similar archetypes to this. Instead, he calls them mentors, and he believes there are 7 different kinds of brand mentors. So those are the 12 archetypes, and I think they are a great sort of framework to start thinking about brand personality, especially if you're working with clients who have never done any sort of brand personality before. Having this wheel is very helpful to sort of look at and go, okay, where might we fit into? So I think that's why the brand archetype wheel has been created. It is a useful framework if you're working with clients, and as I said, they've never sort of done this sort of work before. Brand personality can be really difficult to get your head around. Like, how do you even create one? Like, you know, and this kind of gives a little bit of a useful tool. However, I will caveat that it can be used in the wrong way and it can be overly simplistic. So I'm going to talk about that soon. So where brand archetypes start to fall a little bit short, in my opinion, and I'm not saying they're not a great tool, but I'm saying if you're using them sort of in a one-dimensional way, they can fall short. As I said, the traditional line of thinking is that you should be 1 or 2 maximum. And so that kind of limits the personality, and you'll sort of get clients going, okay, well, we're either this or we're either that. So, okay, if we have to pick 2, we're probably this and that. And then like you sort of get this brand personality that's a bit like flat. And that's kind of where I feel like it falls short. Like, brand archetypes aren't very nuanced. And when you think about people, we have real nuances in our character, don't we? So I feel like it's a good place to start with brand archetypes, but then there's also some research, a lot of research that needs to be done, and a lot of customer research that needs to be done to add layers and nuances onto them. So while it might be a great starting place to work with a client, I almost feel like there's no sort of scale with archetypes. There's no sort of like personality scale, like you're that 100% that. You know, you're 100% the jester, you're always playful. But where's the scale? Because there's a massive scale of being really playful, like, you know, Skittles and Haribo type playful, and a little bit playful, like a tiny bit playful. Maybe you crack a joke or a pun. So I'll give an example with a character that we all know and love. So Yoda from Star Wars, so he's typically been like cast as the sage because he's all about knowledge and education, and he's, you know, quite sort of serious. He knows everything, he's very wise, but he's kind of funny, he's got a sense of humor, he's adventurous, he's bold, like he takes risks, but he's known as the sage. And so it just reminds you that, like, it doesn't really help to sort of box people and brands into 1 or 2 archetypes, because actually when you look a little bit deeper, there's this whole other thing going on. Boxing characters into 1 or 2 archetypes does mean you do get a little bit more of a stereotypical cliched personality, and that's not the best kind of to have really stereotypical cliched, because it kind of feels a little bit fake. Another example is Apple. I mean, they're typically known as like the creator, and Nike, but actually what they do a great deal of is creating a sense of belonging. So does that mean they're also the everyman? Because they've not been labeled the everyman, but actually they create a huge sense of belonging. You know, Apple creates a sense of continuity with its products, that you feel like there's this entire ecosystem and you are an Apple person. And Nike as well, like people tend to just wear Nike trainers and have loads and loads of pairs of them, the one brand. You're kind of loyal to that one brand, and by being known as like the creator archetype and having this sort of personality in one box, you kind of miss that they are a lot about community and connection. And that's why, you know, I wouldn't go to Google and type in, you know, who is Apple as a brand archetype and go off those results, because typically you will get that it's the creator when actually it's a mix of many different archetypes. So how do you actually create a human and nuanced and real brand personality? So something I like to do is to start out with archetypes and get an idea of kind of like the 2 or 3 or 4 that you're gonna look at, you know, the jester, the sage, maybe the creator and the magician, for example. But then do loads of research into your customers. So always back up your archetypes with research. Don't just assume that your customers want to feel like something when you've not done any research that backs that up. You need to know how your customers are feeling and how they want to feel. And obviously there's nuances in that depending on your different customer segments. But do your research and then sort of go back to the brand archetypes matrix and sort of figure out like where could this put you in what sort of 3 or 4 archetypes. But then do other brand personality exercises too. So one exercise I love to do is imagine your brand was a person, and you can do different scenarios. Imagine they were a person. So who would they talk to if they were going to a bar? Like, who would they start conversations with? What would they start conversations about? What would they be wearing? Where would this bar be? Is it in the countryside somewhere? Is it rural, or is it like bang in the city? What are they wearing? Are they kind of dressed in a suit, or are they like, in country outfit, country attire? Yeah, how would they make the people around them feel? Are they kind of the life and soul of the party, or are they like hanging back a little bit and sort of listening to the conversations and seeing who they want to talk to? What drink would they order at the bar? Like, are they kind of are they gonna have a shot? Are they gonna have like the most crazy cocktail ever? So start to think about the brand as if it was a person. This will really ensure that your brand is not cliche, because you're starting to think about it as if it was an actual person rather than a character in a movie like the jester or the sage. Like, how often do you go, oh yeah, I met this really cool person the other day, they were like such a jester, or oh my god, they were just like such a creator, so creative. You don't do that. Like, people have nuances, so don't think about brands in that way either. The whole point of brand personality is that it should not be generic, it should be nuanced. And brand archetypes are all about sort of matching your brand up in a certain camp and leaving it there. But I say go run with that and carry on going and carry on doing research after your archetype and add in those nuances that maybe they're missing slightly. How much of each attribute are you going to spike in? Are you going to be a 10 in humor, or are you going to be like a 4? Something I really like to do to ensure my brand personality is not sort of stereotypical or cliched is to get one softer characteristic, one more bold, and one that's surprising. And that can be kind of anything. Like, think of the opposite characteristic to the 2. Think of what's opposite to the type of brand you are. So I hope this has helped break down brand archetypes a little bit more. I know there's like still loads of thoughts and sort of opinions out there about defining brand personality. So if you have any, I would love to hear them. So I'm going to be sharing 1 video a week, so make sure you subscribe and check back next week for the next video. But thank you so much for being here, and I'll see you next time.